Welcome to Use Your Items, a video game podcast about the philosophy and design of video games, and what we like about them so much. My name's Jason, and with me, as always, is my extreme co-host, Francisco Martin. Fran, what's going on?
Dude, I am so ready to go all city, bro. Let's go.
Bro, I dig it. I dig it. Yes, today we are talking about Team Reptile's platformer, Bombrush Cyberpunk. It came out last year, I believe.
Actually, this might be our most the game that we have made an episode on that was most recently
Oh, nice.
released. To be honest, we haven't really. We usually when we make an episode, it's been a few years for that game to kind of gestate. Maybe Signalis was before this one, I think. So Signalis was
Yeah.
around 2022.
Yes, I think that's correct.
Um, but this one is like fall of 2023. So this one is pretty well out of the like recently out of the
Nice.
oven.
Yeah. So, for those of us joining us for the first time, welcome. Thank you for so much for coming and listening to Use Your Items. My name is Jason. I am kind of like, I guess, a former English major. That's kind of what brought me here. But for the most part, I like talking about games, and Fran is a video game designer, and he kind of brings a lot of the engineering know-how and design to the conversation. And this is one of our more traditional episodes. So if you like this is a lot of what we do. Recently, we've been going through some different uh, editing and recording, just changes in our lives that have impacted the release of the show. So this is more true to form. We pick a game and then we deep dive it for usually, like, I would say at least an hour. Usually it tends to go closer to like the 2 hour range. I would say we're working on it, but we're not.
I'm currently working on myself. If you join our Discord server, that is it'll be in the show notes down below or wherever on page you can find it. I'll probably post a picture of my current recording situation and you will see a an empty room. Everything that is here is two stools, microphone, my Wi-Fi router is over there, like on the floor, and that's about it. So I am like recently moved. So I have not had time to set up. So if there's any funkiness on my side of things, I'm sorry, listener. Without further ado, are you ready to like do a sick kickflip and get into cyberpunk? Okay, let's start with this title. I, for the life of me, cannot say
Oh,
this title on my first try. Every time I try to say Bombrush
Cyberpunk.
Cyberpunk. You see, science. It is such a long title that I've had trouble multiple times either calling it Rush Bomb or Cyberpunk or Cyber Rush or like
Rush Bomb's sick.
I think yes, it is. I wonder why. So the reason why this game, for people who haven't played this game, and this might be getting a little bit ahead of ourselves, but
No.
you play essentially a crew of misfits, graffiti writers is what they call them, but they're really graffiti artists who do kickflips, BMX, extreme inline skating, and all these things. And the crew that you're a part of is called the Bomb Rush Crew, or BRC. So that's where the BRC comes from. And cyberpunk comes with into the light of this game has a lot of influences or tries to take the aesthetics of a punk gang. Whether they reach that maximum potential, that is a discussion that I am sure we will have.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's about essentially you are a group of misfits. You are trying to go all city as the game, as I just said at the beginning, which just means that you want your reputation to go far and wide and become the best graffiti crew in the whole city of New Amsterdam.
Shout
And
out
that's
to New York.
essentially the New Amsterdam. What? New York?
That's what New York was originally called when it was under
Oh,
Dutch control.
that's fair. Okay, I see now a little bit more of the influences then of why that is the case. Though Team Reptile, don't remember where they're at, but I know they're in somewhere in Europe, so I wouldn't be surprised. Maybe are they Danish?
It could
That's
be. That's a good question.
And for those while Jason checks it out, Team Reptile is pretty indie in the scene of development teams. They've released three titles before this one. For the life of me, I can't remember the first one, but it is a platforming 2D side scroller where you play as these mechas. The next two titles are games that I actually played and I actually enjoyed quite a bit. They're called Lethal League, in which imagine that you were playing a fighting game, but instead of fighting each other, you're hitting a ball, and the ball itself is what damages and it bounces off the screen and all these things. Imagine Wii trainer from Super Smash Bros. Brawl, how she can like spike the ball and the ball can hit you. Imagine that, but that is the whole game. Very simple, but very fun, very hard to master fighting game. And this is their third or fourth, depending on how you want to number them game, and it's Bombrush Cyberpunk, which is a huge game inspired. Many are calling it spiritual successor to the Jet Set Radio series, which
Yeah.
came out for the Dreamcast, and Jet Set Radio Future, the sequel, came out for the Xbox. Um, Jason, what is your relationship with Bombrush Cyberpunk?
So before I jump right into that, so Team Reptile is from the Netherlands,
Okay, there you
and
go.
so they are Dutch. So that does kind of line things up there. I mean, Amsterdam's the capital, so I think there's a lot of influence there. I wonder how much of the city is modeled after Amsterdam. I think that would be kind of a cool thing to inspect that I didn't really pick up on. But I won't digress further. I have a limited history with Bombrush Cyberpunk and with it's the spiritual successor that it is for Jet Set Radio and Jet Set Future. I first heard of the game when it released last year from the Into the Aether podcast. They were covering it as a newer release that they were kind of interested in, very much in the space of this is a successor spiritually to Jet Set Radio, and that's kind of interesting to us. And they spoke pretty highly of it, and they talked about the aesthetics, and I thought, oh, this sounds cool. I liked Jet Set Radio quite a bit, and that's kind of where my history with this game came in. I played a little bit of Jet Set Radio like 4 or 5 different times on various emulators. I never played it as an original release. I always played it usually on, I guess, Dreamcast or PlayStation emulators.
Okay.
And I remember having a truly miserable time attempting to play these. The emulators never worked. The controls were clunky and tanky, and the camera was like very, I believe, was like fixed and made it really hard to sort of act precisely. And so I didn't have a great time with it, but the aesthetic was fantastic. The vibe was just amazing. Like the everything that they did in Jet Set Radio just felt like a pristine image of what the future could be by a particular group of people. You know, this sort of hackers esque future, like retro futurism, and I think that Bomb Rush does a really good job capturing that, and that's kind of where that's like my biggest memory of Jet Set Radio is just the feeling and the excitement of being in the space, but not much else. And so I think that's what I came into Bomb Rush with.
Mhm, mhm. Man, hackers as a name drop is quite the
Hackers is
quite
great.
hackers is amazing. If you don't know this, it's a movie from the 90s, early aughts,
90s.
somewhere around there. It is if you haven't watched it and you love so bad that it's good movies, hackers put it on your queue. Amazing. Um, Complete with inline skating and skateboarding that is in cyber punk bomb brush cyber. You know what? I'm gonna need to put in a dollar every time I say it incorrectly.
I think
My
so.
my relationship with this game is that I was super excited for it. When it got announced, I never got to finish Jet Set Radio, and I never got to play Jet Set Radio Future. But I had listened to the soundtrack on loop nonstop for like a month or so.
Okay.
While I was developing, working, music, immaculate music. It's got like some level of hip hop, but it's also got some rock sometimes. It's very all over the place, but definitely remixed. It is at the very end of the day is a very DJ centric music genre where it doesn't matter which genre it's pulling from, it always feels like the DJ is putting their signature on it of like this isn't the original composition or the original like mixes of these things, but I am taking all these mixes, making it my own thing, and like remaking it into a beautiful like composition in of its own. One of my favorite songs, I forgot the title of it, is the one that is there are the four elements of hip hop. There's DJing, there's graffiti, there's break dancing, and then there's the
Okay.
MC. And then he starts like hitting them with the MC rap, and it's like, oh, it's such a good song. Other than the music, only play Jet Set Radio. The Steam port of it, Jet Set Radio Future, I do not believe has a port to any other device. So it only is you can only play it on the Xbox or through emulation. So I never got to play Jet Set Radio Future. Only
Right.
the Steam port of Jet Set Radio, and same thing. I had a very difficult time with the controls. It does feel like it is one of those games where the memories that you create playing that game supersede the actuality of playing the game, where even now I can think of Jet Set Radio of the time like that I had not the best of time playing it. I still remember the music and the art style and
Yeah.
all these things, and so my memory of it kind of supersede the actual like playing it, which is a very interesting thing in of its own accord. Um, so yeah, so that's my relationship at least with Jet Set Radio.
Nice. Yeah, I think that idea that we are left with a feeling after we play a game, and that feeling creates either nostalgia or just general good or bad feelings, just warmth or happiness when we look back on it. I think that's a really kind of at the core of this podcast, and the feelings that we have lingering when we play these games. I think that's critical to what we're trying to do here when we're diving into these games and we're exploring the list of meaningful games, and that's critical to really, I think, the work that we're doing, because at the end of the day we are sort of re-examining these really clean, bright feelings of nostalgia and warmth and joy that myself and my friends sort of found in video games. And so I think you hit the nail on the head with this idea that maybe Jet Set Radio is more than the sum of its parts, and it's just and those feelings and emotions are in some ways really important to it, which I think will tie in nicely to at least my personal experience playing BRCF.
Yeah. So you want to get into the behind the box, everybody's favorite
This is
section?
my favorite segment, the bubble bubble behind the box.
If you are a packing company that would like to sponsor us, please reach out.
Bomb Rush Cyberpunk. Team Reptile brings you Bomb Rush Cyberpunk, a future world from the mind of Dion Coster, where self styled graffiti crews equipped with personal boost packs are battling for each other for control of the streets. Start your own cipher and dance, paint graffiti, collect beats, Combo your tricks and face off with the cops to stake your claim to the sprawling metropolis of New Amsterdam. Red is a graffiti writer who lost his head and instead uses a cyberhead to get around. In search of his roots, he joins the Bombrush crew, Trice and Bell. Together, they decide to go all city to become the best graffiti crew in the city. The more territory they gain, the more they discover who it was that cut off Red's head and how deep this human side is linked to the graffiti world. So that's an interesting that's a funny little behind the box.
It's a very interesting. What I love about this behind the box is how nonchalantly it just says some things. Oh yeah, you get decapitated and your head gets replaced with just a robot head. No big deal. You
with
got this.
no Cyberhead.
Cyberhead. I'm sorry.
Cyberhead. What's that? You'll have to play more to find out. It kind of, I don't know, this one kind of gives me like made by a marketing team vibes, but knowing that, I guess I'll jump the gun a little bit in the development history, but knowing that they were so pressed to get the game out to make any sort of exclusivity windows they had with Nintendo, this also just feels like a first pass.
That's fair. I mean, they're a small team. I wouldn't be surprised if this was somebody, a designer or an engineer or Dion Coster himself, just being like, you know what? I
Yeah.
just need to put something on the Steam page to like kick this out. As we've been mentioning, spiritual successor to Just Set Radio, I think that if you already knew you wanted to play this game, this was not going to sell you on it. You already knew you wanted to play it. You just need to look at the art. They could have just had ASCII art on the like the project
That
description
would be sick
and
though.
been like, I'm sold. I like this game. I want to play it. So
I mean, I think I would love to know, dear listener, if you ever read a Steam store description or an Epic store description, or if you read the description of a game before you purchase it. Like when we do these behind the boxes, it's kind of a good way to, for those of us who aren't who haven't played the game and want sort of a spoiler-free summary, this is a great way to get in. But I don't read these. I haven't read one of these unless it was, for a classic game like, Golden Sun. I remember buying the box and reading the box and the manual 17 times in the car ride home, like that works for me. But this, I'm curious if how many eyes do actually, sort of see
well, I
this.
know personally the times I do actually read some of these, and the times that I actually do read them is when I have played a game, I love that game, but I have finished that game. I want to find others like it. I usually then go, okay, games, tangentially related or similar to. I go through those games, and those are the games that I'll read their descriptions on. Other than that, I really usually just buy the game if I'm interested in it. But just as a side little bit of an example, I have been playing this game called Mini Metro a lot that I have gotten Jason a little bit hooked on. And what it is doesn't matter. What matters is that I finished the game and I really wanted to play something similar to it. So I started going through similar games on the Google Play Store and just reading a bunch of them until I tried to find something that was similar and I would play it. Sometimes it was like, this is amazing. And sometimes it'd be like, ah, God, I got caught by marketing. How dare you? So yeah, I read it a little bit, but not too often. But yeah, dear listener, go to the Discord server and let us know.
Absolutely. I think a lot of it's funny because you'd think that there would be a better way to kind of like Pandora your way through games, right? Like you like this, so you should like that. I guess the Steam queue is
Yeah,
is kind
the
of
Steam
doing
queue
that
is
to it.
fun at the very least.
Yeah, yeah. I tend to go off of
Mhm.
recommendations and vibes when it comes to. I think I need to stop using the word vibes. I feel like it's
If
not
if you're
descriptive enough because I
if
kind
you're
of
gonna use the
abuse
word
it.
vibes, you have to use it for this game. Because let's get a little bit into the design of this game, right?
Yeah.
Because so this game, what are you doing? Like
In Bombrush Cyberpunk, the way the gameplay loop works is you will basically be given the next beat of the story at the top of a chapter, and you will get sent to an area. When you get to that area, you have to do tricks, follow challenges based on the local gang, and tag all of their graffiti with your own by covering it up using the graffiti system that's built into the game. And then as you do that, you will develop greater and greater rep or reputation in that area, which will eventually allow you to unlock the final areas of that borough and then challenge the local gang to combat. No, it's not really combat. It's usually just a score chase. And whoever gets the highest score wins the rights to call that borough their own. And then once you do that, you will get another story beat and then sort of move on to the next level or borough that you have to then sort of take over and take control of. And this whole loop just repeats 6 times, I believe, or 5 times. And each time you do it, the idea is that you're getting greater and greater control of the city. And just as far as at least like graffiti goes, like cultural control. And that will allow you to go quote unquote all city, wherein each of the boroughs are all belong to your gang, Bomb Rush crew.
Jason mentioned that this is a platformer. It is what I would call, yeah, an extreme sports platformer. Essentially, you are trying to traverse the area, go from platform to platform, rail to rail, wall to wall, using inline skates, bicycles, or skateboards, or your own feet. You can actually use your own feet, which is very different from Jet Set Radio and is actually pretty good. I remember the first time in Tony Hawk Pro Skater, which this game kind of gets a little bit of influence from, and the first time you were able to get off your skateboard, and it was actually amazing. Like you'd think that it came about skateboarding, you wouldn't want to be on your feet, but it's actually a different
Yeah.
mode of transportation that is very useful for setting up tricks, making sure you go to some places, stop on a dime and talk to people and stuff like that. So very much like that. It takes around 10 hours to beat, so not that long of a game either. Much longer if you
Yep.
want to get all the side content, because there is, I didn't know about this until afterwards. I'm not going to mention it here right now, but there is a lot of side content apparently that I had no idea.
Very much collectathon vibes.
Yeah.
I was It's funny. So to our listeners out there, I did not completely finish this game. I got to about the end of the final main level, and I could it was not for me. And so I have watched through the end and talked through it with Fran, so I know what's going on. But not dissimilar from one of our earliest episodes, Banjo Kazooie, which is another platformer with a lot of collecting in it. I really bounced off of it. So I think I've learned a little bit about what I like and what I don't like when it comes to just sort of general gameplay experiences. But there's more than you could ever want to possibly collect. And there's a lot there.
Yeah, something interesting about Bomb Rush Cyberpunk in terms of collection is that it doesn't, in terms of collectibles, there's not much. It isn't a game like Banjo-Kazooie, A Hat in Time, where there is a lot of physical objects that you're supposed to collect. There's a few, there's shirts, there's music, there's all these different things, but they're not part of the main story. It's weird in that the easiest way to say is that the what you're collecting in this collectathon are kind of like experiences or like challenges almost, so to speak, where one person will tell you, hey, do this thing here, and you do it, and okay, you've collected reputation. And because the reputation, which is rep in the game, is what you use essentially to move on from level to level, kind of. And you only get reputation by either tagging, so spray painting on other people's art, or by doing these challenges. So you're not really collecting a thing, you're more like something you do is the act of collecting in this collectathon. It's still a a collectathon proxy, but it isn't necessarily a I see something there in the distance, I need to go get it. Because technically, I don't think this game has anything part of the main story that is like that. There's all the stuff that is like I see that and I want that is more for like if you want different clothes or different music or
Right.
different stuff like that. So it's a really interesting angle to tackle a collectathon, and I'm wondering if the developers were kind of treating it as such. Were they treating this as we're kind of making a collectathon where you're collecting these experiences or these intangible things? Or is that just a matter of Jet Set Radio is all about tagging a bunch of all the places that you can find. That's another big thing about Jet Set Radio. You need to tag every single place. Um,
Right.
and it makes it so much more about like collecting all these things. Well, Bombrush, it's a little bit more lenient, but as I learned from Jason's experience, apparently not as lenient as it could have been, it seems.
Not if you're me, I guess, but I'm bad at video games, notably. So that if you too, listener, are bad at video games, you may have this experience. I think it's an interesting point though, because the whole time I was playing it, I felt, wow, this feels like a collectathon. But you're absolutely right. Like you are not really collecting physical things. You are spending your time exploring and sort of discovering within a space all the different places you can do tricks, all the different places that you can grind, all the different places that you can grind, all the different places that you can grind, all of the different places that you can tag different, you can write and do different forms of graffiti. I don't have a strong opinion about the grinding, but we might get into it. And I think you're right though, because it really is similar to my memories, at least, of playing Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 1 and 2, where it's like, yeah, you could make skate and you could collect the tapes and stuff like that. But a lot of it is like, what were the tricks and the things you had to do to get to this new area and find this new space? And like, it created that sort of like experience of having to get there. I don't know that I would call it emergent, but I would certainly call it intended. And I think Bomb Rush does a really good job creating these intentional and guided experiences where you have to go get this tag and go do this thing. And like there's like pretty much one way to do everything, but you can always kind of just manipulate the game engine or the physics engine or like how you're like approaching a trick or an area. And especially when it asks you to build verticality. So I think it does a good job creating these experiences of just feeling
Yeah.
cool, right? Like the whole point of this game is you should feel cool. And for me, that was my anticipation and my expectation going through it, which is I just want to feel cool the most that I can. Like I just should always feel like I'm either wiping out because I tried to do something cool or
Yeah.
I am.
And to that end, the game is very, very, very non-punishing. It is so much about you feeling cool. Something that is really big in Tony Hawk and in Skate is that whenever you're doing a manual or a grind, there is a balancing bar, right? Where you need to actually like balance yourself to make sure that you don't fall off your skateboard while you're doing that. This game does not have it. You press a button, you're now manualing. You are on a grinding rail, you will continue grinding. You do not fall. Whenever it doesn't matter if you're upside down when you hit the ground, your combo is stuck and you're done. If you didn't finish the kickflip by the time you hit the ground, it just cancels that kickflip and you keep on riding and it'll just not count that kickflip as part of your combo. It is very, very lenient in
Yep.
matters of trying to make you feel like there is nothing that you can do no wrong. You are a badass and therefore you can do anything. Unfortunately, a little bit to its detriment. There are some times where I kind of wish there was a little bit more challenge in terms of the combo. There is a bit of challenge in some aspects of the platforming, but at least in some aspects of the combo system, especially, I won't spoil what it is until we go to the spoiler-free section, but there are certain mechanics in the game that once you realize, oh, this mechanic exists, the game's score system becomes trivial. Like it does not exist anymore. You can score millions of points while your enemies have scored only 100,000. Like it gets
Yeah.
ridiculous once you realize I only need to do A, B, and C over and over again, and I will just win every battle, every sports battle or skate battle. So, but I won't spoil what it is.
Sports battle.
Sports.
Sports
I
battle.
won't say what it is until the spoiler section in case you want to find out for yourself.
I think you hit the nail on the head for me. It's that it's the part where the game introduces a system, and then I feel like it takes some of the
Yeah.
teeth out of it. And so you need to have some skin in the game for it to feel meaningful. So in Celeste, right, which is a game that we covered previously, that's a game where you are meant to repeat and repeat and repeat and repeat until you learn and understand the movements necessary to complete a screen or a stage until your next rest moment. And in doing so, you feel empowered as you learn and develop. And the stakes are you have to start over from the beginning. You're being chased, whatever's going on. But either way, like Celeste is giving you this high of you've done it. You did what you didn't think you could do. You have achieved something that you thought was previously unachievable. And it's showing you that you can do something that's very difficult but also very cool and powerful feeling. And I think Bombrush is doing something in a similar space where it's like you need to get a huge score and you have to hold like a manual while you go down the hill to hit this rail to grind to it and like chain all these combos together. And it's giving you these opportunities to feel cool, but the systems in place that are sort of scoring it and judging it. Whereas in Celeste, it was kind of like binary, right? You either got to the finish or you didn't. And in Bomb Rush, it's not like that at all. Like there's so much score that you can get, but after a certain point, like you said, it no longer matters because you've outscored the rest of the characters, the enemies in the game, the alternate or the enemy gang, I guess. And so there's just like not a lot of stakes. It almost just sort of feels, I guess for me it kind of felt a little bit like homework where I have to go do this trick challenge, and it's like I'm
Yeah.
going to destroy you. I am going to bury you deep within my massive score lead because there's like I mean maybe the difficulty needs to get turned up. Maybe I needed to turn the difficulty up at that point, and I just feel I just kind of get the sense that it's one of those AI or those difficulty meters that's pretty hard to actually dial in properly because the if the AI was so good that they just like perfect max like frame perfect scored every challenge and you had to beat that,
Yeah.
like that would also feel
Horrible.
like frustrating. So I think there's quite a bit to that, and I think what the game's trying to do is give you these opportunities to show off and feel cool, and it's maybe leaning too much on
Yeah.
the arcadiness of the Dreamcast.
Speaking of developers leaning too much on certain things and the development of this game, you alluded to the tumultuous development of this game being an international game that just recently released. We unfortunately do not have much information about this game. There's a couple of interviews with Dion Custer, the coaster. I don't 100% know how to say his name. The director and co-founder of this game. But we do know that there definitely must have been some level of development difficulty, given that it was actually slated for 2022 in August of 2022.
Mm-hmm.
They had an exclusivity deal with Nintendo for the Switch. So it was meant to be a timed exclusive for Nintendo. Nintendo puts not a lot of marketing money, but it wasn't an indie showcase and stuff like that. So they were a little bit in that light of like Nintendo is trying to say, hey, we have this exclusive game that is going to come out for the Switch, timed exclusive. This will be the first place that you'll get to play it. And unfortunately, they had to delay it, and they delayed it a year until August of 2023.
It's
And it
brutal.
went from being a timed exclusive with a question mark of we don't know how long this timed exclusive is. It could be for a while. A month later, it came out on PlayStation 5, Xbox, Steam, and all these different things. So it seemed from just reading between the lines, they probably had to release in August of 2023 to have some level of exclusivity with Nintendo without breaching contract. but still not. They already have these contracts with these other companies of releasing on Steam and PlayStation and Xbox. This
Yeah.
is might be a total conjecture, or maybe I'm reading too much into the lines, but given the final product, how it runs on the Switch, I usually don't like talking too much about hardware performance, but it is rough on the Switch. Both Jason and I had multiple times
Yeah.
where it would crash mid-load. There's a lot of loading screens in between every single burrow. What this game calls burrows, which is kind of like the levels. And for a game that is all about moving fast and being cool and all these things, it really feels like a game that was meant to be open world. Like you can go through this whole city without loading screens, and to be met with loading screens is just such a bummer. To the point that I loved the
Big speed
traversal of
bump.
this game. I loved going around, grinding, going fast. I could feel the speed and I really liked it. But the loading screens were such that I was using fast travel just so that I can reduce my my loading screen to one. Because otherwise I knew, oh, I need to go through three loading screens to get to that area. Even though I would love to do that traversal to
It's
get
not
there, I'm just
tenable.
gonna fast travel because I do not want to go through three loading levels. That is three times a chance that the game might crash versus one that is at this one. So unfortunately,
Yeah.
if you are past the days of loading screens, if that is something that you cannot handle, and or crashes are unacceptable to you, that is a fair stance to take. And I would say I don't know if this issue is relevant in other platforms, but at least on the Switch, you might want to skip it.
I agree with that. It was pretty disappointing to have the game crash, especially if the game enters a. I think I identified that it was mostly whenever the game enters a loading screen from a cutscene, there was something that was going on that caused it more often than not to crash somewhere between the 50% plus point. So that was it was really just a shame. It really took the speed out of you, the wind out of your sails while playing, and it's also especially like for me where I was getting frustrated playing it. It's really hard to come back with a fresh face and take the game for what it is after it crashed you to the
I
home
don't
screen a
think I
couple times
ever
during a load.
continued playing after a
So
crash. Every
that's
time the game crashed, I was essentially like, I guess this is my time to put down the controller for a bit and do something else. Um, so
yeah. I mostly did that as well. Towards the end, when I was trying to pump through the end of the game, I kind of chugged through it. You mentioned a little bit about the exclusivity, and I was wondering if you could talk to the ideas and potential value of exclusivity deals as an indie developer from a game developer standpoint. So generally, I would imagine that the most consumers would say a game being on more consoles than not is just better, right? I have more opportunity to select my choice. So why is an exclusivity deal like something that's enticing to a developer?
there's two big factors. First one, money. The grand scheme of things is that if you're getting most exclusivity deals have some level of monetary gain where Nintendo is paying you to say, hey, we will pay you X amount, or we will trade in marketing dollars of like we will market your game and push your game and do all these things for you if you have a timed exclusivity with us. So some of it is that where the money is there and therefore you have a invested interest in, okay, sure, I can release in 10 of these five different platforms, but if I don't have the marketing money to push all those platforms, maybe it's better to go on one platform where the console manufacturer has promised me to blast it through their social medias where I will make my money back more likely, and then release in other places when word of mouth and all these things
Right.
happen. That's the first thing. The second big thing is it is much more difficult than people give it credit for to release in multiple consoles. We are living in a world of Unity and Unreal Editor and all these different things where it is becoming easier to release in multiple platforms, and more machines are becoming a little bit more and more. unified in the types of like infrastructures that you develop for and have and code in. At the end of the day, though, every single platform that you have is another QA pass, quality testing pass that you need to make sure that that game works on that machine. It is another different licensing issues of like, okay, Xbox has these different 10 different things where I need to make sure that they pass that those 10 different things for quality assurance. If it is a international console or international machine or anything like that, are there any laws that over there I'm not allowed to do stuff for their console and things like this? It just the development. It isn't a multiplicative effect. It isn't like developing for two platforms is twice as hard to develop than in one platform. But it is a sizable chunk of time and development hours that you need to put in to make sure that it works and it is appropriately developed for that. It is becoming easier and easier as we move forward with Unity, Unreal, Godot, and all these different development tools, but at least it is still a sizable chunk of development. And given that the tumultuous development time that this game might have had, it might have worked to their favor that they could have just focused on Switch for as long as possible until
Yeah,
early 2023 when they had to start doing the gears for Xbox and Steam and
porting and
these
stuff
different
like
things.
that.
So yeah, those are the two main, I would say, factors when it comes from what is the benefits of an exclusivity deal. Downsides, you mentioned
Yeah,
it.
thanks. No, I think that's awesome. I appreciate you sharing and giving a little insight to that to that ever popular term exclusivity, console exclusivity that we all love so
Which is
much.
kind of it's little by little kind of losing its steam, right? Like other than Nintendo, like I think what is recently was it Sony or Xbox? One of the two announced. Oh, Sony announced that their Horizon Zero Dawn was coming out for Xbox. Was it? Was that it? I forgot which. There's like an exclusive game for Xbox or Sony. I don't remember which
I
one it was that was finally getting ported to
I
the other
believe it's
console.
an
And this
I
was
believe
like
it was
a
part of the of like Xbox with like their recent issues with regarding layoffs and closing studios. I believe they started
Mhm.
licensing some of their games out to more
Gotcha.
consoles to make some money back. I mean, Sony
Mhm,
does
mhm.
do time like delayed releases on PC where a console. I was just talking to some friends about this over the weekend where Sony's business model is for single player games they will come out first on PS5 or the current gen console, and then a year later they will release to PC. Usually, right, or if not a year later, then like around the same time period as when the sequel is releasing. So that way you're like, oh wow, I really
Just
like Marvel
faster.
Spider Man on PC. This is so much fun. I can't wait to play the second one. You can just buy a PS5. You can play it right now. And so they're trying to use single player games on PC as a way to drive hopefully consumers back towards the console. Which I mean I guess it does work.
Mhm.
I did buy a PS5 last year. I bought it for Final Fantasy 16 exclusively, which has been that's a different episode, but that's I think where they're coming from. Whereas Game Pass is a little bit more, or I guess I jumped the gun there. Xbox is more interested in Microsoft is interested in this Game Pass system of we're going to take your money, we're going to get you on a subscription service, we're going to give you everything you want, and then once we have you kind of baked into the system, we can start selling you more stuff. We can start monetizing this in other directions. And I think that Activision Blizzard King deal is a huge portion of what Game Pass is looking to do. Currently on Game Pass, they're linked up with Tencent and Riot, right? So you can get every agent in Valorant if you have Game Pass. You have access to every single champion in League of Legends. You have access to exclusive cosmetics in TFT. And that's all just a function of playing these free to play games that you don't need to spend money on, but it sure is nice sometimes.
Yeah, it feels like Microsoft is going and Civ is trying to do the political diplomatic victory while Sony's trying to hit more of a tech or culture win.
Yeah,
Um,
well,
it's
I
interesting.
mean, Xbox and Microsoft can't help but step in shit every chance that they get, and Sony is
Yeah.
just by sheer virtue of raw quality of games somehow managing to take L after L and then still remain like the top dog, and then Nintendo's off in the corner doing whatever the Nintendo wants to do.
Yeah, they're doing their own thing. They're eating non-toxic glue and having a great time.
What a how rude are we?
Um, we're hitting up around 40 minutes. I want to go quickly through the culture
Yeah,
impact. Not much there because obviously just came out. Mostly favorable reviews. But even though all the reviews I was reading left and right, there were very much in the vein of, wow, this game is so much fun to play with these caveats, right? Like it wasn't like a lot of other reviews where it was very much either critical, but at the end of the day, they were very positive. This one was like, we're very positive, but these issues are very real, and you need to be okay with looking past those issues. Some of the issues being combat, which I'm sure we will talk a little bit later. um the some people hit or miss on the story. We will talk about that a little bit later in spoiler section. And biggest thing of conversation was this whole idea of, is Bombrush Cyberpunk different enough for it to be a spiritual successor, or is it just copying Jet Set Radio? And that is a huge topic of conversation, which I guess we can hit in right now. But just before that, Steam stats: Bomber of Cyberpunk, 9.4 million in gross revenue. So, for an indie game, that's actually
yeah,
pretty good, pretty sizable. Over 302,000 units sold. Awesome. Jet Set Radio, just to give a little bit
comparison.
of insight. These are just the Steam stats, by the way. So obviously, Jet Set Radio came out on Dreamcast. We won't know exactly how much that actually is. 5 million in gross revenue on Steam, but it has 1.1 million units sold because it sells for like $5, so much cheaper. So many more units have been sold on this. Um, I think that Jet Set Radio, when it came out, was number 28, I believe, most sold Dreamcast game of all
Nice.
time.
Beat out Seaman,
Um,
really?
so, dude, you know what Seaman
Yeah,
is?
Seaman's awesome.
Seaman's like Seaman's in the top five,
Is it
bro.
really? Oh
Yes.
wow.
Okay. This is a Japanese tier not tier list, sales list. I'm not sure if it was international. I found it in the Wayback Machine. I'll find that and send it into the show notes.
Yes,
But
please.
yeah, I was surprised to see Seaman. So so tight that for those of you who don't know, I don't even want to tell you what Seaman
No,
is. Just go
well,
watch a
yeah.
video.
If you're
You just have to
interested,
go.
if you want to know what Seaman is, join the Discord and ask us there.
I'll just reply with a picture. Yeah, so let's hit the spoiler free verdict. And also, I think the last thing we have to talk about is the big picture of, is this a good spiritual successor, or is it a copy?
Hmm.
So for me, spoiler free verdict. I personally feel like this game is definitely, luckily, it is divided into around like 5, 6 chapters. I would say play the first chapter if you get it on sale or anything like that. Past the first chapter, if you're not feeling it, it's going to be more of the same. Honestly, every chapter is pretty cyclical in what you're doing. The biggest differences are the areas that you're exploring. So if you play that first chapter and you are 100% not on board, not feeling the vibes, not feeling the music, might be a skip. Even if you're feeling the music but you're not feeling the game, I mean, the music is available on YouTube and it is bumping. So
Yeah, that would be the intro that you see in this episode was from Bombrush Cyberpunk, and I'll probably chop in some of my favorite songs. maybe some other spots as well. But my spoiler-free verdict is that Bombrush Cyberpunk is a really, really great idea that I think needed to spend a little bit more time in the oven. It was not really the most fun I've had video gaming. I think it's it's a great game if you are looking for a pretty, what I feel like nowadays is kind of like bespoke, like extreme sports gaming experience. Like if you want to ride around on a skateboard, if you want to do BMX, you want to do, rollerblading, inline skates. You sound like so old, by the way, Fran. If you want to do rollerblading and do tricks and do cess slides and do all this and do all these like dead grinds and stuff like that, that's awesome. Like, and I think Bomb Rush will be there for you, and you will get exactly what you want out of it, despite its flaws. But I think if you're looking for something with a little bit more meat on its bones, I would say keep an eye on the studio, keep an eye on Team Reptile. I think they have an incredible vision, and they have just a truly immaculate, just artistic ability to deliver on that vision.
Yeah.
Because I think it's really easy to say, we want to just do Jet Set Radio and we want to capture everything that people love about it, and then really just miss marks. Whereas this absolutely captures, I think, the heart and soul of Jet Set Radio. So for me, it's a bit of a miss. I would probably hesitate to jump into it, but like Fran said, if you check out a demo, if you can play the first game or the first level or something, and you're enjoying it, I think it's worth the time. But if you are maybe on the fence, I would say maybe wait until their next release.
Yeah. If it does ever happen, the timing for Bombrush Cyberpunk honestly could not be honestly a little bit worse. They've already, since it got released, like a few months later, Sega announced that they were remaking Jet Set Radio. They released some footage, only like 10 seconds to 15 seconds of footage, and it looks a lot more dynamic than the original. It moves a lot more like Bombrush Cyberpunk than I expected, which is very interesting because I don't think they would have been able to develop that as a response to Bombrush in time. The original
Right.
creators are on board in that project. And if you're looking for more skating, since like I think in the last couple of weeks or 3 or 4 weeks, Skate is getting, I don't know if it's a remake or a threequel or anything like that, but Skates is releasing another game. So it's a little bit in this weird spot of uh, I would recommend this game, but at the same time, you could just wait a year or two and actually play the remake or Skate if you really want to do skating, you can play Skate. If you really want to do Jet Set Radio, then you can play Jet Set Radio then. So it's
Yeah.
in this awkward spot. But now we got to talk about this. We've mentioned a lot of Jet Set Radio. How do you feel about this game? Do you feel like it is a little bit too wearing its influence on its sleeves a little bit too visually, like it's too obvious, or do you think that it is an appropriate amount, or do you think that it's 100% should not matter? I guess that's the third option, right? Like it doesn't matter if it's a copy or a spiritual successor.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think so. I don't think it's too much. I think it's obvious what it's pulling from. I think it for me, Bomber Cyberpunk is a game that is very confident in its visual appeal and its visual style, and it knows where it's pulling from. It's using super polygonal characters to pull you back to the aesthetic of the Dreamcast without fully throwing you in
Mm.
there. And I think especially, to these days, retro gaming and retro aesthetics are more popular than
Yeah.
ever. Massively, massively popular in just like the gestalt of video game consumption and the art surrounding video games. So I think that makes sense. I don't think they do too much. I don't think it's too on the nose. I think that there's a potential when you are directly copying an art style and releasing it as if it's, your own, that it can come off as contrived or derivative. And I don't really think that comes across here. I think Bombrush is doing quite a bit that makes it feel like a game that's also very aware of graffiti. I don't know enough about Jet Set Radio. I would have to do more research, but I get the sense that Bombrush Cyberpunk is really in touch with the idea of what it means to be a writer, what it means to be participating in, a city's graffiti scene. And yeah, it's playing it up for, sort of like the video game of it all, and kind of, sterilizing it a little bit. But at the same time, I think that Jet Set Radio in many ways is sort of taking is just taking a different
Yeah.
direction. In it just feels like Jet Set Radio is kind of doing something different, whereas Bomb Rush Cyberpunk, it has taken what Jet Set Radio had set out to do
Mhm.
originally and struggled to do so originally, and yeah, it copied it in some ways, and I think adjusted it in all the right
Mhm,
ways.
mhm.
It's kind of like the good art borrows, great art
Yeah.
steals. It's somewhere on that spectrum, but
I man, I think that to go back to what I had mentioned about how this is definitely a game where the memories I have of this game are much more immaculate and fun than the actual action of playing it. I feel like the only way that you can call this game a copy of Jet Set Radio is if you are feeling that, if you are remembering Jet Set Radio and feeling Jet Set Radio. But if you go back and play it, Bomb Rush just brings so much more new to the table. Like the movement is much better, the combo system is much better, the graffiti and how you tag a wall is so much more unique and up to you and how you do it that I really don't see where people these people that are writing these reviews about like, oh, it's just Jet Set Radio, it doesn't have any new ideas of its own. Uh, at at worst, what you can say is that Bomber Cyberpunk fixes a lot of the issues of Jet Set Radio. So even if this game was a full on, if you want to say it's a copy from a like directive and aesthetics and all these things, sure, but I still think that it provides enough fixes and enough new things that it should be able to stand on its own merits. And I think that Bomb Rush Cyberpunk has that. I do believe that this game has brought a lot of new things and a lot of new ideas. You can bike and skate, which are two modes of transportation. Now, personally, I think that they're not different enough from each other. They feel very too
yeah,
similar, but at
sure.
least they're trying these new things, and maybe with more time, they could have gone further with the concept. Having said that, I haven't played Jet Set Radio Future, and at least from reviews and from like online communities and everything like that, it does sound like Jet Set Radio Future fixes a lot of the movement and fluidity issues of Jet Set Radio. So it might be one of those cases where the less popular, not less popular because of quality, but less popular just because it came out. It is a sequel of a game that came out in a separate console, so it's a kind of difficult sell. Um, it might just be that the game that less people played is the game that it hasn't been released on Steam or anything, is more similar to Bomb Rush, but unfortunately I haven't played it, so I can't really say much about that. But at least from what I've read, it seems like it's much more similar to Jet Set Radio Future than it is to the original Jet Set Radio. Um, so, it's one of those weird things where I think Bomb Rush Cyberpunk is different enough that I would call it its own beast with the same art style and same music, but it's still its own beast. Having
Yeah.
said that, if you play Jet Set Radio and you didn't like it, I don't know if you'd like Bomb Rush. I guess it's the reasons that you didn't like Jet Set Radio. If you didn't like it because you couldn't move 10 feet without crashing and doing something dumb and doing something you didn't want to do, Bomb Rush fixed that. So go to Bomb Rush.
To be honest, I kind of get the vibe that you will know
Yeah.
if Bomb Rush is for you or not just by watching a video. Like if you watch one trailer or like one quick like gameplay video of like the first level, I feel very much
Yeah.
like you will know immediately. Like you're either the kind of person who the aesthetic is going to carry you through this experience, no questions asked, or you're going to figure out pretty quickly that
The
maybe this isn't for
vibes.
you. It's arcadey. It's yeah, the vibes. It's an arcadey score chasing, you know, sports game. I guess I don't think of it in the same space that I think of like
No, it's
skate
not. Definitely.
or or like those other like sports like there's like that hyper realistic like snowboarding game that I can't think of. But it's really not in that space at all, and it does improve on a lot of what Jet Set Radio is doing. And yeah, I haven't played enough of Future at all to really know how much it's dialing in on that. But I think with that, this is a good place for us to clip it, and then we can head over to our
Sure.
spoiler section.
Hit it.
Reptile boy.
Hey, Frame, welcome back.
Okay. Spoiler section. So something that you might not have noticed.
Hold on. Not even a hello? Not even a hi? Hey, how you doing? We just came back from a break and you just
Viewers, it's
ignore
been
me?
weeks. It's been weeks
Rude.
since we recorded the last section.
Don't say that. They're gonna believe you. They're gonna believe you that we're cutting
Jason.
this in.
Hello, how are
Yes,
you doing? You're looking great, by the way.
I
miss
miss
you
you. I haven't seen you in. Well, actually, I saw you last week, but that doesn't count.
You saw me last week in my like 3 hours in Boston.
Yeah, you basically had a 3-hour layover in Boston, and as a New Englander to drive into Boston on a weeknight, that's how you know. That's how you know I care about France.
Yeah, that is honestly that is the most beautiful thing anybody has ever done for me. Drive to New England to hang out with me because I would not do that for most people.
Rough, rough.
Um,
All right. We
sorry.
can. I'll let you go now.
I'm business. I want to go all city. This is real business. Graffiti arting is real. And this game is all about that.
Graffiti arting.
Graffiti arting is real, or writing, as the game says. So the game, something that we might not have mentioned too much because it kind of goes in directions that I did not expect it to go, is really the story of cyberpunk,
Right.
cyberpunk, Bombrush cyberpunk. Jason, did you expect this story to go the way that it did?
Not at all. Absolutely 0%. I kind of thought it was gonna be at least just from vibes alone. It was just gonna be skating, graffiti, writing, tricks, and like a real shake your fist at the authority, like anti-establishment in the sense of like, oh, those damn cops and oh, those damn kids sort of vibe. I was not expecting a decapitation in the at the
At
very
the first
beginning of the
five
game.
the first 5 minutes of the game about decapitation. And even after that, like the decapitation happens and your head gets replaced with a robot head, and you're all about, oh, I want to know more about the person that this body belongs to. I want to be learn more about myself, so to speak. And honestly, I thought it was just gonna be that. It was just gonna be, okay, DJ Cyber, the guy who decapitated you, not really big spoiler, you could see who it was, who is, by the way, immaculate design, has a super awesome helmet and robe, and his like shoulder pads are vinyl discs that he can remove and throw you like a frisbee to decapitate you. Pretty
Yeah.
immaculate design, visual design, super cool. Um,
His robot, his vehicle is the Ghost in the Shell robot. It's like
yes, it
perfect.
is.
It's what a great homage. That's
That
cyberpunk
is
as fuck.
cyberpunk as fuck. We will talk much more about what if how punk this game is or is not in a bit. But essentially, so the story starts like that, and I thought, okay, this is just gonna be a story of self-discovering, finding out who you are, and blah 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 blah. But the game takes a weird ass turn when you discover that there's actually a human head inside of your helmet. You never had a cyber head. You actually had the head of somebody inside your helmet. And this is treated as normal. Oh yeah. And actually I like the insinuation. The first borough that you go to battle the crews are called the Franks, and they're like Frankenstein humans who have like
It's
change
sick.
their bodies to make themselves better at either basketball or skating or graffitiing and all these different things. So there has been little by little insinuation of like, yeah, Frankensteining and switching bodies and all these things is not that unusual in this world. So if it happens later, don't feel so like out of left field, because then when it happens, you're like, oh shit, this is a mystery, and this is actually a plot twist that I was not expecting. I expected this story to just be A to B, very linear, and that's it. And I don't want to go too deep into it because it's not as interesting just retelling what the whole story is. But essentially, the story just takes from there a huge turn as to, okay, who does my head belong to, or my body does who belong to Foe, and this guy Foe spelled Faux, and it is about him. And apparently you thought he was the good guy, but he's the bad guy, and he becomes the ultimate villain of this story, where he's trying to become All City as well by killing all other writers and by taking over the policing system and becoming essentially like an authoritarian ruler of New Amsterdam.
It becomes evil
He's evil
RoboCop.
RoboCop. Yeah, exactly. In more ways than one, he literally becomes a robot thing at the end of it. So I don't want to go into details of the story because the details isn't really what matters.
You just did. That's what else?
Bro,
What else detail is there?
the Flesh Prince? Are you kidding me? What an awesome pun, bro! There's a character called the Flesh Prince.
I was just shocked that you didn't bring up that there's the Flesh Prince, who's the head of the Franks. You didn't bring up
Solace, the best character
the
in
oil.
all of
Yeah. Okay.
Storydom.
So, all right. Let me step in here. What I find is going on, at least in my experience with Bombrush, all of these twists are totally out of left field. The game becomes really, really interested in the cyberpunk of it all, and less so of the jet set anti-establishmentarianism of the sort of teenage angst and rebellion. They're not really teenagers. I think I kind
Yeah.
of see them as young adults, but either way, like that sort of rebellious youth that kind of gets rewritten into this very, very, very cyberpunk aesthetic. This story of identities, of humanism, and what it means to be human. Fran and I were actually joking before the podcast started that we just keep playing game after game after game after game that is about self discovery, identity, and what it means to be human. This is I guess, our third one in a row after Signalis, Soma, and
And
now
what
Bombrush,
a third
which
installment. We didn't plan this. We didn't expect Bombrush Cyberpunk. We just wanted to have fun skating and being fuck you cops. And apparently we got some like self-discovery of what does it mean to be. It's like, what?
there's like I think for me the biggest win. I want to start with what I really like about this game, and I kind of want to get into sort of holistically view like reading games as well. But what I really like about the story of this game is that it is absolutely maximal to the nth degree. If it can take an opportunity, if it can make a Fresh Prince pun and call him the Flesh Prince, and then he's actually a titular like meaningful character who has to,
Well,
like, I mean, he's not that
but
meaningful,
you
right? Like,
thought
he's
you
not like
think they introduced him as if he was a one-off character in the first Burrow. And
like a
then he
joke.
actually keeps showing up, and he actually has like actual like meaningful like like he's actually meaningful
Yeah,
to the story, and you do not expect that. That's like it does a good job. I think the best thing of this plot twist is that the first like two chapters build up this like straightforwardness of aren't you having fun? This is so cool. Yeah, we're gonna have fun. DJ Cyber, the Flesh Prince, the Franks, haha, fun, fun, super cool. And then from nowhere be like, actually, you should have been paying attention because all those people are actually important to the story. And I know that I'm talking as if this is a like masterclass and amazing and beautiful, and it isn't that. It really isn't. But it really does add to the enjoyment of the game of like you were expecting something very, oh, this is fun. Oh, I'm having fun. And they're like, oh, that's actually cool, kind of cool. Oh, it's kind of cool. Oh, we're going into my owned mind, kind of like Psychonauts esque, where I am now entering this world
Yeah,
where
yeah, yeah, yeah.
gravity is being distorted and I need to like grind upside down to get to the end of my dreams and my memories because DJ Cyber just happens to have a DJ disc deck that allows him to go into your memories and try to like make you remember who you really were. Like all that I'm saying right now, you're a listener. I would imagine that if you've never played this game, is like, wow, he's saying a lot of things that are like from very different like narrative like left fields. Like there's four left fields to this room, which is impossible, but somehow it does it and it makes it work. Honestly,
I think that Bomb Rush's biggest wins are that it takes a setting that doesn't need to have much story at all, and takes a setting that probably is better at telling these stories of humanity and self-discovery than we take them out to be. Youth, young adult, teenage, city living, graffiti, self-expression, all of these parts of life that we don't often see played out in cyberpunk spaces, like these smaller, less high stakes settings. I feel like often when we tell cyberpunk stories, they're naturally dystopian, and I feel like the stakes are often much higher than what the stakes are here. This is all self discovery. This is all for the sake of going all city, which within the scope of the game, within the scope of the story, is extremely high stakes. It's the best that you could do, but in reality, there's thousands of bystanders that you bump into endlessly throughout the course of the game
yeah.
that don't matter to you, which is, I think, a great that's a great one-to-one on just being a young adult or being a rebellious youth. Like, I don't care about anybody but myself. They're in
Going
my
all city
way.
is a title. It really does not give you any political power. It does not give you anything that is tangentially,
You just become the
yeah.
best writer in
And
the
everybody
room,
respects
or
you.
in the
Well,
in the city.
everybody in
That's
that
all it is.
community respects you. It's not even a mainstream community. It's a very fringe community, like you were saying. There are thousands of NPCs that are just walking around that just see you as a nuisance as you skate across them. They're like, "Hey, bro, like, are you kidding me? Come on, I'm walking to you." Like
That hurt. But your point is 100% right, and I think that's one of the more exciting and like beautiful moments of Bomb Rush is that the whole point of the game is while you're trying to do the self discovery and this conversation about humanity. I think more importantly, it's a game about acceptance, and it's a game about being accepted within your community, but also achieving the most that you can within it. In fact, that level of achievement, that idea of competition, I think is the part where I find the most friction with Bomb Rush Cyberpunk. Trice breaks Foe out of prison at the very, very, very beginning of the game, unknowing that Foe has a lot going on. His father's a corrupt police officer, and he killed Felix and all of this stuff. DJ Cyber chops off Foe's head, who agreed to, at that point, Trice, oh my god, I'm getting my names so confused. Foe had agreed to Trice to join his crew to go all city. Trice had a crew of one other person, Belle, and I like Belle a lot. You don't. We'll get into it. And Belle and Trice wanted to go all city, but they couldn't get there because they needed better writers. They needed a better writer with them, and Trice knew that Foe was one of the quote unquote big three writers that made up the best three writers in the city. And so we start off the story immediately with this sense of camaraderie, community, friendship, and going above and beyond for the people who you sort of
Mhm.
welcome into your home and welcome into your space and your your found family, right? Except that it's not Foe's head, it's Felix's head that goes on Foe's body. And then we start getting into, these double entendres of, oh my God, Foe's name is Foe, and that's French for fake, and it's not his, and he killed Felix, and Felix's head is on Foe's body, and Foe's head
Felix is
is,
another one of the top big three as well, and he was the last person who was able to go all city, by the
and he
way.
went all city by himself without a crew,
Yeah,
notably. I think that's so beautiful. Like I think that's really really cool that we get to have the story that is doing all of the cyberpunk stuff with like the Ghost in the Shell references, with diving into your memories, with doing like this Inception sort of like Psychonauts moment, with bringing in these different sorts of like these like weird flesh Frankenstein creations and the Flesh Prince, and I think the game A leaves all of that on the table very early, and B, I think that
yeah.
it's an interesting backdrop to a story it is wholly about community, and I don't necessarily see the sort of correlation there. And in fact, I think sometimes they kind of are at odds with one another, and that's where that sort of competition stuff takes me out of it.
I agreed. One of the very first things about this game that really pulled me out is the hideout. So the Bombrush crew has this hideout in which you essentially it is kind of like a hub where you can switch your
BMX.
skateboard, your clothing, your BMX, and all these different things. And they call it, hey, this is the Bombrush crew hideout. This is where we go to relax and chill and all these different things. And so my initial thought whenever they were saying, oh, we're trying to go all city, I was like, okay, so as we can take over these boroughs, we'll see the Franks here. And we will see .exe show up in the hideout. And as you're taking more of these people, this hideout is going to become more lively and more communal, because at the beginning it's only 3 people, you, Bell, and Trice. So as you go through the game and you become more all city, maybe you are spreading your reputation and you're becoming more communal and giving more to the community. They start giving back and they start showing up at your hideout and joining your crew and all these things, and that never happens. The hideout is
Such a
so
letdown.
empty just the whole time, and it is such a letdown. There's a cool in theory mechanic for whenever you're switching characters, you can go to a dance pad and you start dancing, and then your other crew
Start a
members
cipher.
you start a cipher, your other dance members coming and start dancing with you, and that's where your character select screen, everybody dancing. How cool would that have been
It's awesome.
but how cool would that have been if, as you go through the game, collecting and getting more burrows and everything, a bigger crew starts to accumulate every time you start dancing? So there's some kind of gameplay. Oh, we're growing, we're becoming big, we're about to go all city. Let's go.
Yes.
And that doesn't
The
happen.
game is so small.
Yes.
The game keeps everything so small. It's the 3 characters. And what killed me on this, and this is the part where I feel like it just needed more time in the oven, is that after the Franks, there are no named characters. Or I guess there's the leader of the Eclipse, but she doesn't matter. She doesn't come up at all. The .exes,
Cool design again.
it's cool design. There's a couple problems there. They're all just recolors and reskins. So there's really no individuality among them, which that's an interesting story to tell, but we're not telling that story either. We're using them as just like a motion vehicle to get killed. And then the demon theory, a cool idea, completely nondescript characters. When they all died at the end and they like betrayed the rest of the teams because they sold them out to Foe, to Project Algo,
The
I'm
police,
like,
essentially.
I'm like, who the fuck are you? Like, literally, who are you? Like, what is going on? Like, I don't even get this. And like, there was no repercussions other than them dying to getting like walloped by Project Algo. there were no in community repercussions for them calling the cops on other
And
writers. Like there's just
there is some level of community rules and laws that we learn very early on in this story, that this isn't just a make believe community or a make believe like society. There are these people called the
they
old schoolers, or I don't remember their actual name. Old
old heads,
heads.
bro.
The
They're the
old heads.
old
I'm
heads.
sorry, no disrespect to the old heads, who are the representation of essentially like old rap and like old like hip hop and like all these
Yeah.
different things. And they're a really cool design, really cool idea and about them. And they're essentially kind of like at this point in time, now that they're so much older than the new crews, are essentially like keepers of the code, so to speak, where they're like, hey, no matter how much you hate each other, don't go out around killing each other. If you kill each other, that's not cool, and you're going to be like be caught by the police and all these different things. Like, yeah, we're doing illegal stuff, but we're doing stuff that is illegal that shouldn't be illegal or whatever. Like, we're just tagging, we're just making the city more beautiful and all these different things, which I guess is a bit of a not a bad uh oh God, I forgot the name for segue. Not a bad segue to the police in Bombrush Cyberpunk.
There's just a lot of moments, and the police are a huge one of them for me, where I see what they're
Mhm.
going for, and I can kind of I can wrap my head around. It's like very obvious that the police are the establishment. They're bad. They're harshing our vibe. They're harshing our mellow. Like they aren't doing this thing. And the my problem with the police is that they are so deeply corrupt, and we're not dealing with that, and that's fine. Like the scope of the game probably doesn't need
Yeah.
to deal with that, except that we have to keep getting all of these cutscenes to Project Algo and all of these cutscenes to the chief of police who doesn't seem to care, and all of these cutscenes to Reitveld. And it's like, oh, like you have like she has such a fascistic name to
And she
begin
turns
with,
out to be a good
which is
character,
hard.
weirdly enough. Like,
Well, she shows up with Felix's body at the very end and gives you your original body back, and I'm just like I just don't understand. Like, what are we supposed to understand here? Because according to Felix, according to the text of the story, if or I guess Red Felix at this time, according to Red Felix at the end of the story in the conversation with Project Algo, he says if it weren't for the competition, if graffiti was legal, this would be boring and fun and nobody would do it. We only do it because it's illegal and because we're competitive
yeah.
about it. Which was directly in response to Project Algo saying art is war, which is 100% going to be the subtitle of this episode, BT dubs. But that it's just like what are we
It
really
is.
doing here? Like why are like these cops exist just to provide a little friction to make
Yeah.
the rest of the world fun. Like the community is so excited. Like they clearly spent so much energy building the community in this world and like setting up rules and using ideas like when I saw the old heads, I was like, I literally turned to my partner. I was like, this is awesome. Like this is so fun. This is cool. Like this is what I want to see. And like, oh, the cops are like, ooh, maybe the cops are corrupt. And then it's like they get redeemed. Like we
Yeah, it's
redeem the
such
cops
a
at the end of
like
this. All of the cops aren't actually evil. They're infected. All of the like the main cop that we deal with, Reitveld, is like actually a hero who saves the day
Wha-
and like gives the senzu bean to Goku. I don't remember. There's no cops giving out senzu
there
beans in
was
my Dragon Ball
one
Z.
police character who is essentially a mirror of Red, the main character, who is essentially like a badass sniper character who gets dropped after chapter 3 and never gets mentioned again.
Oh my! I
Yeah,
forgot
it's like
about him.
so the police drop the police, the story of the police get dropped so hard here. By the way, Jason mentioned Red Felix at one point. We learn at some point that the head inside the helmet is actually Felix's head, who was killed by Foe in the past. So we never got around to mention that, but that's the spoiler.
Yeah, yeah.
The police, and not just from a story perspective, are the police such a letdown. From a gameplay perspective, oh my, I kind of wish the police just didn't exist. in this universe. You know what? Let's just make this universe a universe in which the police just doesn't exist. And
Careful, Fran. You almost got me very
God,
excited.
from a gameplay perspective, there's two modes, so to speak, for the police in Cyberpunk, Bombrush Cyberpunk. Mode one, combat, which I don't even want to talk about it here because honestly, it is nothing good comes out of this combat. I think that's just the spoiler-free verdict here. The spoiler verdict for combat is this is probably one of the worst combats that I've had in a while because I guess I'll go explain a little bit as to why. There are no moves that the player can make that are explicit attack moves. Essentially, you can only do kick flips, you can only do Indy 500s, you can only do pop shove its, you can do all these different skateboard tricks and skating tricks. There are none of the tricks are aggressively enough like an attack move. There is not very much kick move or punch move. So the first time you go into combat,
Yeah.
you're like, well, I have no combat moves, so I guess I need to run. Oh, I can't run away. I'm kind of stuck in this little like little area where I can't do anything. Well, I guess I'll just do a kickflip around them, and you do a kickflip around them, and sometimes they'll get hit and fall back, but you kind of it looks like they're falling back just like any other NPC just falls back and then gets up top of their legs. So there isn't much impact there to tell you you're actually doing damage here. So you're actually doing something that is correct. There isn't enough feedback there for you to know, is this what I'm actually supposed to do? The only feedback that I ever
Yeah.
got was if I use my jetpack boost to like headbutt into them, they would fly across the room. And
Yeah.
then that's where I was like, oh, okay, so that's the combat. That's what you're supposed to do. Apparently, that's not necessarily what you're supposed to do. It is a viable thing, but at least when I read the reviews and all these things, people who are like ride or die, bomb rush, cyberpunk, apparently there's a huge like juggling mechanic, like battle mechanic to this where you can actually like do a specific trick which jumps them into the air. You jump into the air, you do specific tricks, and it just like combos punches them kind of deal. And I have no clue. The game doesn't tell you. There is no like good feedback to tell you this is what you're supposed to do. The combat is just
Weird.
it's such a huge miss. It's so flat. That's
Flat.
the perfect word for it. I think it's so flat that it just I would have rather it not exist and just move on. The second mode the police have, I'll try to make this really. Do you want to say something about the combat before I move to the second mode?
I do want to just stop in where and say, and usually this is your shtick, Fran, where you say, I wish they had done this instead. I'm gonna do that this time, and I'm gonna say, I really wish the cop showed up and started fucking skateboarding. That would have been so ill. It would have been so dope if the cops showed up and said, "That's it. We're gonna have to outskate them." And that would have been
Dude,
unreal. And then like you can keep all the boss fights. You can keep all the boss fights are fine because there's grinding and tagging. But like if it was like a skate off with the cops or like Velt, like Right Velt or whatever her name
dude,
is, it
dude,
would have
no, no, no.
been
And they have a mechanic where I'm gonna explain the second one where instead of spray paint and tagging, they have mops and like Febreze and like stuff to like clean up the graffiti to kind of like lower your reputation. That would
yeah.
have been so sick.
Yeah, I think that combat was a big miss for me as well. I don't want to fully interrupt you, but I do want to step in and say I know we're being harsh and I know
Mhm.
we are criticizing here, and I do want to say that I just want to make sure that we understand that
Yes.
this is a very good game in the sense that it's a functional game. It plays really well. It's fun. The game is fun and it is doing a lot of things and we're excited to talk about it, and it was a miss for me and it was just not the game for me. But I think that what Team Reptile
Mhm.
did is really important, and I want to celebrate the fact that
Yeah.
they took a lot of chances here to make a game like this, and because not a lot of studios would do that, but there are some parts where it misses for me, and I just want to try to be
Sure.
a more holistic as we continue to approach it, just in the sense that, there's a lot of good stuff
Yeah,
here, but
just
there are
reverse the
definitely some
podcast
misses.
like 5 minutes and we'll be talking again about how awesome the story is and how it goes in different directions that are weird. And not awesome in the fact that it's actually deep or like fulfilling, but more from a I did not expect this, and this is a pleasured surprise for me. So yeah, there's two modes to the police, and from a gameplay perspective, they're either fighting you or they are chasing you. And this is where the game, as Jason mentioned, it's very cyclical. Every burrow kind of plays out the same, where you are tagging, you're doing stuff, and then you do a combat, not a combat, a score battle, and you move on. As your reputation grows up, the police know that, oh, they're around here, we're gonna go stop them. And here they stop you by like shooting you and like doing all these different things. They bring helicopters. It gets ridiculous, which is kind of cute from an idea perspective of like, oh, they're like literally like bringing in the SWAT team.
They're
It's like
escalating
cute.
like crazy.
Um, but
Yeah.
the annoying part is that it gets to a point where it just is a negative from a play perspective of like the big one that I didn't like was that there's this like enemy type that has these like from a design perspective actually pretty cool. It shoots out these chains that at the end of the chain they're handcuffs, and it like grabs you
Oh,
and
the
slows you
turrets.
down until you break them and do enough tricks to like break them off or whatever. The problem is that those slow you down so much that sometimes you're just trying to have a good time and playing around and stuff, and it just harshes your vibe. And I know that we were complaining back when we were like, oh, there isn't enough of a challenge or anything like that. And I know that this sounds like we're now contradicting ourselves and oh, this is annoying. Why are they challenging us in this way? I think the reason I don't find this a lot of fun is because the counter combat or the counter of this enemy type is not go fast, is essentially avoid the turrets, and therefore it is don't explore as much, and is definitely therefore making the world smaller because this enemy type is just too annoying to deal with, and therefore it isn't trying to push the main mechanics of go fast, do tricks, be badass. It is more of actually follow the law by not going near them because you don't want to like actually interact with them because they're annoying from a gameplay perspective. Um, as Jason mentioned about like, oh, if they were skating and stuff like that, how cool if they were like cleaning up your graffiti as you're going so your rep goes down so you are
Yeah.
encouraged to go fast, right? You're now encouraged of like, oh, every minute I take that paint to take off a graffiti, okay, so I gotta go fast and go really cool and like do like maybe a huge combo, and while you have a combo going maybe they won't clean your graffiti, so you're like encouraged to like paint a bunch of places off of one
Sure.
trick and all these things, which are more encouraging the gameplay loop that the game wants you to do, rather than making this like deterrent of like doing the stuff that you want to do. And I'll leave it as that. The police in this game, for me personally, is a bit
Right.
of a miss.
Yeah. The police, the combat, it's all pretty flat, and it just creates a pretty I think for me it just makes the gameplay loop like it introduces an aspect where in every single burrow you unlock areas of the burrow piece by piece by piece by getting your rep up, and then by doing score challenges or trick challenges or races or whatever the NPCs are putting you up to. And a lot of them are actually pretty cool, and they can lead you in some pretty interesting exploration spaces. But you know that eventually the cops are going to show up once you've explored the entire place, and then all they're going to do is make you continue doing what you've done, but now you have to get the last, X, Y, Z tags to finish your rep out and get to the boss fight in the area. And like that's it, it's just like an inevitable thing that's going to happen. And unfortunately, it's just not very fun for me. So it was definitely a miss for me, but it does lead me to some stuff that I really did enjoy in the gameplay, which was I like when you get to Matan at the end of the game and you get challenged to, oh, I forget DJ Cyber's crew's name. I can't think of it. But you get challenged to a race.
Futurism.
Futurism, thank you. Yeah. Futurism, the ladies in Futurism challenge you to a race down these series of alleys, and you have to like grind and wall ride, and you have to like get through all of these like there's people and umbrellas and booths and places to eat, and like you have to just like navigate around it while there's two like they're racing you, and you have to get to the end before they do and hit a tag, and like there's a couple different ways to go about it. It's just like really exciting. It's just like a very exciting breath of fresh air because we haven't had to race anybody for speed, and you haven't given us this area, like given us an area to explore where the idea is like go fast, go really really fast and
Mhm.
do it in one like and then like race NPCs to the end. And it's like I was like, oh, that's gonna be what the rest of Matan's about. Like it's good, they want to go fast and they want to race, and then you get through it and you win the race, and it's a very cool design, but I think a pretty punishing area to explore. And there's nothing about racing or anything like it. It was just like so cool to see what you can do in the space and the loop of Bombrush Cyberpunk. And so I just want to see more of that. I would love to see more of that. And that's like when the game's like really really fun.
So there is this concept of vertical slice. Have you heard of this, Jason?
Mm-mm.
So vertical slice in game development is, for better or for worse, is a concept that whenever you're making a game, you want to make a slice of your game that has a few pieces of everything. So that way it kind of gives you an idea of what to expect for a publisher or as a demo. The idea here is that, oh, if you had a cake and you take a slice of the cake, you'll be able to see all the layers. Um, I'm not gonna get into it. We're gonna get close to 2 hours here. I'm not gonna get into why a vertical slice might not be the best idea as a concept in production. That's a
Okay.
story for another day. But it really does this whole race system and the fact that the Franks are so important, but .exe and Eclipse are not as important and all these things does smell to me as they made a vertical slice where they made these modes where, okay, we have a race mode, a combat mode, a this, and this. And they had all these different ideas, and then they realize we do not have time to make as many extra races, as many extra this, as many extra this, and all these things. So we're just going to end up doing the three easiest ones, and those are going to be the ones that are repeated later on. So
Right.
there are a lot of one-off ideas throughout this whole game that are super cool and interesting, but at the end of the day just become one-offs that kind of leave you wanting more because it just feels like they didn't have time to flesh those ideas out. Um, Another one we mentioned it kind of shortly was this idea that you have BMX, you have skating, and you have skateboarding, and you have skating, and each one of them are essentially just flavors. They're not like any
Yeah.
benefits to one over the other. Really, I this might be just in my head. I feel like skating, inline skating, is the slide is shorter than a manual or a wheelie.
Definitely.
So there
Skating's way harder.
so there is some mechanics there. I think they had an idea at some point of each one will have benefits to them to kind of make some traversal easier than the others, but they're not different enough for you to feel like I want to do this versus I want to do that. You can essentially do all of them with just one. And that's an area where I was like, okay, can we flesh this out? Let's make them very different. Let's make it that biking is like the best one for like flat surfaces. Skating is the best one for like slopes and like doing aerials and stuff like that. And inline skating is the best for railing or something. I don't know. Like I'm just throwing ideas out
Yeah.
there. And it really does feel like they had all these amazing ideas, ran into issues, and therefore were like, you know what? We already have the music, we already have the art style, we already have a pretty solid story. Let's do the important thing and just get this game out, which honestly, admirable. Like sometimes you just need to finish a project. From a
I totally
perspective of
agree.
like, sometimes you're just like, hey, we could do better, but something half baked is better than nothing at all. Um,
I mean, and to continue using consultant speak. Sometimes the juice isn't worth the squeeze. How much longer
Yeah.
would it take to develop that? They're a small team. They had limited resources, and I don't personally see this as like a negative feather in their cap. I'm
No.
very excited to see what Team Reptile does next, and I think they've proven here that they can take a idea like the retrofuturism of Jet Set Radio, and we can redo it, and we can attack the sort of traversal and the parts of it that were not well received, and put our own spin on it, and then we can tell a few different stories here. And I think that's really exciting to see that they can tackle this single player experience that's that it's way more gameplay driven here, but I think that they have more story chops than you might imagine
Yeah.
if you once you start to sort of look at what Bombrush is doing. And even just in the traversal methods like you were speaking of, it's pretty, I think, obvious to me, and I think if you play it, that they wanted every single traversal method, every single vehicle to feel unique or to have some sort of flavor. And for me, the problem is that it is so difficult to swap them.
It's slow.
So you have to go back to home base. If you want to play as red and you want to play as red and be on a bike, then you need to but you're on a skateboard, then you have to go back to base, and then you have to go find the bike, and then you have to go swap to the bike, and then God knows how many loading screens later you get to go back to where you were. Sure, you can go to a Scythe and dance and swap out characters and play as Trice, who's usually on a BMX, but if you want to be Bell on a BMX, you have to go and swap all that stuff out. Like, it's just like there was a lot of stuff that I feel like like this could have been a menu. Like this really could have been a menu. Like this could have been you do your Scythe, so when I go to my Scythe, when I start a cipher to do a dance, I select the dance from a wheel. I do nothing to do the dance. But then I have to be the character that I want to switch into a new vehicle, and then I have to go find the vehicle in the home base, and they're not all next to each other. One of like the rollerbladed one requires some amount of traversal to get to. And so in a remarkably vertical area, vertical space, and then I have to swap to them. There was just like a lot of like weird, interesting speed bumps that the game created, where it does feel to me like there was a few different ideas going on here. I mean, I don't know. I don't want to harsh the game too much. For me, the idea of community is one that I keep coming back to, and this idea of art is war that Project Algo keep sort of cites at the end, where he's going to kill all the other writers to become the main writer. That to me was like the most interesting thing that was going on. Like that was at least as far as like narrative wise, like we get into this conversation of art is war and like war, so like competition and art and like wanting to be the best. It's pretty antithetical to traditional views of art, the old ideas that war is destructive and art is constructive, and the only way to oppose war is not peace, but it is art. It is building stuff. You have to make new things, and so that's, I think, classically cited in many circles as art, right? And Foe declaring that art is war is pretty indicative of both his. Are you getting blasted by the sun right now?
So getting blasted by the sun. I'm so
Why don't you
sorry.
move your seat? That's okay. Listener, I am not cutting this, and just for the record, I'm watching Fran just like fight for his life against a setting sun coming in through a looks like a glass door, and he's just like his eyes were tracking along this band of shadow.
I looked badass though. I looked like I was like that Kermit meme, with the hood up. I was like, ah,
Yeah.
yes, yes, hate on the police of
Yes.
cyberpunk.
Is that
Yeah, it's
better?
much better.
Yeah. So yeah, I just wanted to touch on this idea that art is war, and it's like this interesting inversion of art over war or in spite of it, and it kind of opens the door to this conversation about graffiti. I did a little research on graffiti. I just kind of dug
This is
into the
why I love
Wikipedia
you.
page,
This is
so nothing,
beautiful.
no, and graffiti's awesome. It's something that I definitely want to learn more about. So traditionally they are called writers in that space. So that is not in the text of the game. That is in the actual text, and that first entered the, I guess, academia and writing on graffiti in 1971. So it's pretty old to call it writing and writers. And graffiti is really fucking old. Some of the earliest recorded graffiti was like in Rome.
Yep.
And then there's like graffiti is really like, I guess I never thought of it, but it's a very human act to publicly place art in places where you maybe shouldn't.
I mean, it goes all the way
The
back
idea that
to the cavemen, right? Like drawing on walls. Like why?
the
Why
cave
did they want to
paintings,
fade that cave? I don't know. I just felt like fun to like leave my
it's
history.
pretty
I was
cool.
here, and this is what we did, and we were badass.
If you're at all, if you're still here, if you're still listening, I imagine you probably are intrigued by this game and intrigued by graffiti. Definitely look into it. It's a really cool history. I want to learn more about it after reading about it and seeing how this game treats it. My biggest criticism, and my biggest like uh praise for this game is that the way you apply tags to the wall is very innovative. It is super fun. It feels like something they developed early and they refined over the course of the game. I do wish it was a little bit easier to figure out what I wanted
Yeah.
to draw. Like the idea of having to open up this GTA 4 cell phone menu to find that cell phone pissed me the fuck off. To open up this GTA 4 cell phone menu to find the graffiti and then look on this tiny little screen inside on my tiny little screen to see what the pattern is, that was a miss. But the idea that I have to draw out a symbol to apply a new graffiti was great, and all the graffiti was beautiful.
Did you
The art
actually
was
ever do that?
gorgeous. The artist they got for it,
Did you actually ever
what?
bring out your phone to see like, oh, I want to do this graffiti. Let me like keep it open to.
Yeah,
Okay,
whenever I got a new
that's
graffiti, I
fair.
wanted to do it, and then I would open it up, and also it would clear out the notification. I'm a
Yeah, that's
notification
fair. That's
freak.
fair.
In case I cannot abide a badge like a little red badge with a white number in it. It's bad for me. So I can't abide that, so I have to clear it. But yeah, it's like but that's the whole thing with graffiti, right? The idea of graffiti is that I'm sometimes like it's warranted, it's desired, like we want graffiti on this place. You might hire a graffiti artist to put something on your wall, and that's in the same space but very different than like gangs and groups of people tagging spaces and applying their mark to it and marking territory, which is something that it also does. So there's two sides to graffiti immediately, more than that. And so when the game allows you to sort of draw the symbol to create a tag, very cool, very, very fun. Feels very much in the spirit of graffiti or
You feel like you're
graffito.
actually tagging. You
The
feel like you're
problem
actually doing the graffiti, even though you're not.
You do. Yeah, you feel like you're doing cool shit. Like, again, moments where this game makes me feel awesome. And like especially like when you get a tag down and then like you hit it and you're going fast and and then boom, a tag goes up and then you hit another one and you keep like you feel somewhere between tagging and like I don't know, like doing like like hand
Yeah,
jujutsu
it
in
really does. It
Naruto or
really
something
does
like
feel
that.
like that. Whenever you do like a stroke, it feels like Like it feels like you're
Hmm.
such a badass, and it's like all you're doing is moving the
It
stick,
feels
the analog
so
stick in a
dope.
direction, but it still feels so cool.
Like it's great. And then my problem, my issue, my criticism here is I am doing graffiti. Why do I have to do it where you're telling
Oh,
me? Why do I have to go to this bright yellow square? And listen, I love yellow paint. I'm a big fan of yellow paint. I got no bad things to say about yellow paint. I'll tell you right now. Why am I doing graffiti in a square? That doesn't feel graffiti. I'll give you a pass on the Dreamcast. It is 2024. Why can't I just not apply tags where I want, or like have like
mm.
surfaces that you
Or,
can tag? Like
tag anywhere.
that's a
You can
different.
spray anywhere in a lot of games, but then make it so that your rep does not go up unless you're tagging over other people's tags, you know?
Or
Yeah.
just in cooler spots. Like, okay, maybe you're not tagging over futurism here in the subway or on the ground, but you got up someplace higher than they've ever been and you got a tag and that's worth more points because it's up
That could
higher.
be its
Like,
own mini game, right?
it's just like,
Like you could have like a bunch of these stories of
yeah,
like,
the
oh, tag an obscure place, and unless you tag an obscure place, it doesn't give you those points. Tag the highest place. Tag the a place in front of a police box or something. Like you can play around with this.
what if .exe was all about the most obscure tags and you have to get
Mhm.
more obscure tags than they do, and like the Franks were about the most prolific tags so they just have the most, like there's just other ways to use graffiti, I think, and I think they got the first 50% of it
Yeah,
unbelievably well. Like that, the feeling of tagging is great and I wouldn't
the
really want to
micro
do it
sense
any
is
other way.
amazing. The macro is not.
Yeah, I and especially when you end the game with this art is war idea, which is so interesting to think about graffiti as an art form that is necessarily overwriting other forms of art. You are literally covering up someone else's art with your own in a very competitive, almost I don't know, counter I don't want to say counterculture. It feels like very like hegemonic way that I'm overwriting your art with my art to show my supremacy. And this idea that art is war, like, oh my god, yeah, of course art is war when you're doing graffiti. Like when everything is about having the sickest tag and drop and putting it the biggest tag over somebody else's tag to show that you're better than them, of course art becomes war. And this is now we're in this space of what does it actually mean to be doing all these tags and to be going all city and to be showing your supremacy? Like there's this sense in the text that Felix is the good guy and he's so brilliant and he's like this quiet, brilliant writer that, he can do no wrong. And it's like, okay, but like where we're going with Foe before we find out that he's just like some bratty like police like cop kid that is now strapped into a robot, like where we're going with that is like he's a kid who had to work harder for what he needed and he wasn't as naturally good, and the whole point of the and he wouldn't and Felix wouldn't shack up, wouldn't team up, crew up with Foe, and Foe feels not only left out, but he feels like he's being erased because all we do in this city in New Amsterdam is we erase other people's art with our own. I think there's like something so interesting about that story
Yeah.
and this idea that art is war that I just wanted to see play out a little bit more.
Totally agree. And there is room there. There's like the story ends with Bombrush crew being all city, but DJ Cyber still wants to also have some influence. The police, they don't dismantle or defund the police, so the police are still gonna be around. So there is very much, I think that the way that, and I guess this goes in a little bit into my spoiler verdict, is that this game really, really reminds me of the original Assassin's Creed. If you go back to play the original Assassin's Creed, it is very repetitive. It is very like linear and all these things. Like you see ideas and like all these story beats that are really good and like, oh, I'm interested in finding out about that, or I'm interested in the Animus and Abstergo and all these different things, but the gameplay itself was a little bit not there yet. It was like a really, really nice appetizer or demo. And then when Assassin's Creed 2 came out, that's when we cooking, you know? That's how I feel with Bombrush Cyberpunk. This
Yeah.
game is really good to whet the appetite, to make me think, oh, there's something here. This is something really cool and something really special. Even if Just Set Radio Remake comes out, even if Skate comes out, I really don't want Team Reptile to actually continue this story and maybe with a bigger budget or anything like that. They took it over a year of delays. I'm not sure how much the revenue that they got from this game is going to allow them to do a deeper sequel, but definitely it is something that I'm like, this is I want to see more of this. And I think that's my like final thing that I want to say about Bomber Cyberpunk personally, of like, yes, we were negative about the police, yes, we were negative about combat, yes, there were like things that weren't too they were that we wanted more out of, but we wanted more out of it because we loved the idea and we loved the initial premise and execution of it. If this was a game in which we disliked pretty much everything, or we liked the idea but all the executions were horrible, I don't think we would be here talking about the podcast. We would probably would just skip it. um so
Yeah, I agree. I mean I think I speak for both of us when we say we want, just like that tweet, we want more games made by less people getting paid more that look worse. Like, I want smaller teams executing their vision. I want them getting their fair due. I'm not upset that I spent $40 on this game. I had a great time talking to you about it. I had a lot of fun playing it for a lot of times, and there were times that I didn't. And I think it's important to uplift indie developers whenever we can. Even just coming here today, like, I was worried that I would malign it too much. And listener, if you're still here and you feel that way, I apologize. I just wanted to sort of share that I care enough about this game to continue talking about it, because there's a lot of material, there's a lot of media out there that I wouldn't even begin to discuss because it just doesn't work. And I think that's happened before when we've looked at games together, when we've talked about games that we could discuss and bring to the show, or things that we could talk in off weeks about. So I would just say, as a final note for me on the game, I really enjoyed a lot of what Bomb Rush is trying to do. It's just not quite there for me. It's not quite the game for me, but it could be the game for you. Do a little bit of research, dig in, tell us what you think about this show, helping you figure that out in the Discord, link in the show notes below. But it's, unfortunately, Bomb Rush is not a game for me, but it might be a game for you, and it has very, I think, lofty aspirations, and it doesn't quite achieve them.
completely fair. Well, thank you so much, Jason,
Yeah.
for coming here with me and talking through these feelings that we have about how cool graffiti is, and how now I want to go out and do graffiti again and, tag some places. Um,
I kind of want
yeah,
to
I
do
mean, I
graffiti,
got
yeah.
spray painted. Anyways, hey, don't forget everybody. You can find me. I'm being a little bit more social on underscore Fantastico on Threads and on Instagram. I'm also sometimes sporadically on Twitch, L underscore Fantastico. By the time you hear this, I might have moved into my new place completely and therefore would be a little bit more active. But if I'm not active, then I'm not dead. I'm just moving. How about you, Jason? Where can they find you?
You can find me, of course, on our Discord, link in the show notes below. We'd love to have you join us there. If you disagreed with us on anything we said, or you agreed with us, please let us know. We always welcome a good, healthy discussion. If you'd like to find me outside of the Discord, I would say the best bet is to try to reach me on Twitter. You can find me at Dancing Frog Game on Twitter, or X, I guess. That's where I spend most of my time. I'm usually there posting. I don't post much at all, but I'm usually there retweeting about Magic the Gathering, or following Magic the Gathering content creators. So a little unrelated, but we all need to have our vices. You can also find me on our blog, Substack. So it's useyouritems.substack.com. We haven't posted there recently, but if you're interested in some more articles, you can see some stuff that we wrote there in the past. And as always, if there's some place that you'd like to see us that we're not currently, let us know. Shoot us a message down below in the show notes. You can reach us at useyouritems@gmail.com. You can join us in the Discord. Or you could simply leave us a 5-star review on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or your podcast app of choice. It means a lot. It does a lot. And
Yeah. Thank you so
that's all I have
much.
to say on that.
Don't forget to go all city, and especially don't forget to use your items.